Another common ratio that stakeholders use to measure the health of a company and make decisions is called a debt-to-equity ratio. The debt-to-equity ratio compares how much of the company's assets were purchased using debt and how much were acquired using the owner's own money, or equity. The more debt a company uses to purchase assets is known as leverage. Therefore, a highly leveraged company is a company with lots of debt. A company with low leverage has little debt. Generally speaking, a company that has higher equity and lower debt is considered healthier. A company that is highly leveraged is considered a higher risk because they may not be able to make the payments for all of those debts if the economy struggles. But again, ratios are only truly valuable if compared to something else. So you would need to compare the debt-to-equity ratio to previous accounting periods or similar companies to know if the company is a high or low risk comparatively. Just like with the return on sales, the name of this ratio, debt to equity, tells you how to calculate it. That's what's so cool about ratios. The word to in a ratio means to divide. So to calculate the debt to equity, you start with total debt, or total liabilities in accounting terms, and divide that by total owner's equity. Debt divided by equity, or debt to equity. Pretty neat, right? Let's try an example. Let's imagine that your company's balance sheet for this year showed $147,300 in total assets, $93,100 in total liabilities, and $54,200 in owner's equity. To calculate debt to equity, we start with the $93,100 in liabilities and divide that by $54,200 in equity. That gives us a debt to equity ratio of 1.72. This means that for every dollar that the owners own, or equity, there is $1.72 of debt. So there is almost twice as much debt as equity. That is a highly leveraged company. The debt-to-equity ratio is always expressed as a decimal, typically rounded to 2 decimal places. A ratio greater than 1 means that the company has more debt than equity and is more highly leveraged. A ratio that is less than 1 means that the company has less debt than equity. Generally speaking, we want a business to have a low debt-to-equity ratio, but remember, it all depends on context. For example, a brand new startup business usually has a high debt-to-equity ratio because they start their business on loans. That makes the business a higher risk, but it doesn't mean that the business is failing. It's just starting out. So just like with all ratios, you have to compare them with something else to really get any value out of them. Now let's review. Debt to equity is calculated as total liabilities divided by total equity. It is always expressed as a decimal. The to in the name means to divide. Debt to equity shows how much of the assets are purchased using debt, and a higher ratio shows more leverage, which is higher risk. To learn more about ratios and other accounting topics, check out more of my videos on YouTube or visit ToriNorman.com.